Hello, this is Kutani, and once again we are back playing Kerbal Space Program and saving Kerbals. In my last video, I cheated somewhat to save a trio of beleaguered Kerbals out of fuel on an escape path away from Kerbin after missing the moon. This time, I'm not going to make use of any exploits or otherwise cheat, and we're going to stage a proper rescue mission. We can see here the rocket I've built. It's a pretty standard asparagus staged rocket. Four mainsail rockets and a central staged in pairs, and then our main transit intercept stage at the top. At the very, very tippy top of the rocket, we've got two pods. Jebediah is in our top single pod, and then we have an empty three-man pod below it. That will be for the Kerbals we hope to rescue. Everything else is pretty standard, though I have a little bit more RCS thrusters than I would normally. We'll be using those. So, we're going to go look at the ship. We don't currently have a trajectory for them. What I'm going to do is, instead of launching into an equatorial orbit and then adjusting my inclination to match, keeping in mind that the orbit of this probe or this capsule we'll be capturing is polar, coming over about this way, and about 1.6 million kilometers out. The cost of delta V to change inclination that much is extremely high, and we're running under pretty tight tolerances. In an early simulation of this run, I launched to equatorial and then tried to adjust inclination, and I just didn't have enough fuel. So to save fuel, we're going to wait roughly one orbit, or half an orbit. Yes, about half an orbit till we're about where my cursor is here, and then we're going to launch southward and try to match the orbit that our turtle lander ship here is moving at. Yes. So let's go ahead and do that, and by the time we circle around, we should have an intercept for this vessel coming up. You can see it's actually moving very, very fast. We don't have a lot of time to catch. There we go. See, there's the orbit. You can see the two different strands. One of those was the lander, the rover, that didn't quite make it. We're going to set this as our target. We're going to launch, get as close as we can, and then on our way circling around, we will adjust our inclination. We've only got one chance at this, only one pass. So we have to make it right. Lining up the inclination so I can get a good feel for it. Alright, that's about as long as I want to waste on that. Okay. So, standard launch procedure here. We do have MechJeb installed, so I can keep track of my Delta V information, and also to help manage the throttle on ascent, because these mainsails are monsters. When we begin our gravity turn, we're going to be turning to the south, probably a little bit further south than 135 on the nav ball. We've got a little bit of wobble in the ship. I actually forgot to add struts to the tops of each of the side stages and connected to the center. If the ship was much larger, this thing would probably tear itself apart on it's way up, but it's just small enough that it's alright. Good enough. Let's begin our turn. Now, we're not going to go straight into orbit. We are just going out as far as we can, as fast as we can. It already looks like we need to move further south, so I'm going to veer more towards 180. Apoapsis is already going up pretty high. Oops. Forgot stage. We want to push this out as far as we can because our orbit has got to take us out to here, maybe further. Oh, time to stage. Now on our transit stage. As you can see, we've got about 3,000 or so meters per second of delta V, which is enough to get just about anywhere, depending on how long you want to take. Alright, so that's a decent starting orbit. Now we need to set up our intercept. First we're going to adjust our inclination, try to get it more or less aligned. And having done that, we're going to extend out. There's our target position at intersect. There's where we'll be. So we push this out a little bit further. And now we just make small course adjustments. Until we get an intercept. And we really just need to get within a certain distance. You can see we've got 2 intercepts as we come out and then come back. Either one is good. Just a matter of time. We have a little bit less recover time on the second intersect, but that's probably going to be the easiest one to catch. You can see here it's just a lot of very fiddly adjustments. Back in 25 kilometers. That could be better. Let's try adjusting 23, 18. It's not bad. What we're going to do is we're going to get as close as we can here. 9.8. That's very, very good. Alright, that's our intercept. Catch it on the back end. As you can see, we could fiddle around. If we tried to get an intercept on the first pass on the way out, we would probably be moving too fast, and we'd be catching them somewhere out here, and the delta V cost to meet up at that point would really be prohibitive and very, very dangerous. So we're going to catch them when we're moving a little bit slower over here. And we are 12 minutes out from our maneuver. We're going to get in position. Estimated burn 1 minute 46 seconds. We'll do a quick burn just to confirm. About 2 minutes it looks like. So we will start our burn at about 1 minute out. Here we go. Now what's going to happen once we make our intercept and catch up, we have to match velocity, move up closer. Oh, missed my window. Match velocity, move up very close, transfer the kerbals, and then we have to perform what is going to essentially be an emergency brake maneuver. Because once we match velocity with that pod, that means we're going to be on the same orbit, thus leaving Kerbin. So we then have to use every amount of delta V we have to pull our apoaps in close enough that we don't sail off into interplanetary space. But we don't want to immediately burn all the fuel we have to bring us down back onto the planet, because it's just too efficient, and we don't want to end up requiring a second rescue mission. So we're going to pull that apoaps in close enough to where it's only a few hours difference, swing around, and then bring our periaps down. Much cheaper maneuver. And there goes our orbit on its way out. As ever, we don't have to be completely exact. The more exact we are, the more efficient we are, but we've got a decent amount of leeway planned into our Delta V budget, so it should be okay. And pretty close. One slowly, and there we go. So, it shows we've got an intercept of 40.3 kilometers. According to MechJev, however, our closest approach distance is 12.28 kilometers. I'm going to trust MechJev in this case. 0.1% on the difference, that's fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make tiny adjustments on our major vectors and bring that target closest approach distance down as much as we can. And wow, we've got a really good intercept. Okay, so looks like we can get within 1.2 or so kilometers. Just a little bit of burn here. The other way, just a tiny bit. 1.3 kilometers, that's great. You can see our intersect thinks 1.5. I'll take it. We don't have to make any further adjustments. Once we get there, we'll start our burn to match velocity. Right now, I've switched the target mode on the nav ball. Our relative velocity to our target is 2.9 kilometers a second, but that's because we are heading in the opposite direction. This number will drop considerably as we move around. There we go, it's dropping. Now, when we're in target mode on the nav ball, we've got a number of icons that represent something different than they do in orbit or surface mode. The prograde and retrograde markers represent the direction you need to move to increase or decrease your relative velocity to the target. The pinkish nodes represent facing towards or away from the target. So the standard orbit matching intercept procedure is to get yourself on a close orbit, get yourself an intercept, and then once you are close enough, which close enough is a very relative term and takes some practice to really understand exactly what close enough is, you want to burn target retrograde so that you slowly bring your difference in velocity down to zero, or as close to zero as you feel like. And then once you've slowed down enough, you then point your ship at the target, give it a little bit of thrust towards it, and continue to do a trade-off, killing velocity, moving towards the target, killing velocity, moving towards the target, until you get close enough. The first time you do it, it seems really unintuitive and complex, and if you do some research on the Gemini missions, when we were experimenting with docking to orbiting ships, a lot of the pilots had a lot of trouble understanding how to move in orbital reference frames. It's a very, very unintuitive type of movement, and you just kind of have to get a feel for it. Best practice generally is to just get in as fast as possible and don't worry too much about being careful. If you're careful, your orbits which are by nature have to be different, you'll be constantly fighting that. If you do it quickly, you bring your orbits as close as possible. Let's see, we are 25 minutes out from closest approach, so we're going to go ahead and time warp. Going to go ahead and start killing relative velocity, because it's already increasing again. And I'm not worrying too much right now about our closest approach distance. We're going to continue refining that as we go. We're now 200 kilometers away. Closest approach is increasing, but we are killing our relative velocity. I'm going to wait till we get a little bit closer. We don't really need the map anymore. We should be able to see it. There's the rover, 26 kilometers out, and where is... not on screen yet. 2,000 some odd meters per second to spare, so we're still good. We should see a pink icon appearing any moment. There, or green, sorry. The default settings in Kerbal is to have the models and data for ships load at about 2.5 kilometers out. Well, it does this for performance reasons, which is one reason we want to try to keep this within 2.5 kilometers. Okay, let's start up our burn again. Really, as long as we're within about 10 kilometers, even now we're pretty good. We can start making our adjustments after we've killed our relative velocities. Seven kilometers. 5, about 250 meters per second difference. We are right on top of it. 200. 100. And close enough. From here out, we're going to be using our RCS thrusters to save fuel. RCS is extremely inefficient in terms of ISP, and it is very heavy. So we want to use up all of it, or as much of it as possible, before we begin our return burns. It'll maximize our delta V. So we can see now our target relative velocity 0.1 meters a second. We're going to point at the green circle on the nav ball facing directly towards the target and thrust towards it. We can see our closest approach is dropping very quick. We want to be very, very close to it. We also have a time consideration. The longer we wait, the the harder it's going to be to get back to the planet. So closest time to closest approach 14 minutes. We want better than that. So we're just going to keep pressing forward. This is with the H key while in RCS mode to head forward. Closest approach is kind of on its slowing down. 4 minutes out. Okay. 13 meters a second, we are heading towards it. I'm going to go ahead and speed up. You can just see it now, it's been loaded now that we're close enough, and we're getting closer. Alright, we're going to continue to use our RCS and start killing our relative velocity again. This is pretty much how orbital intercepts work in any situation. And if you have a space station that is in a stable orbit and you want to meet up with it, you just want to launch, try to get your launch time so that you end up in an orbit as close as possible to the target, and then use your RCS or your main thrusters if you need to slowly bring yourself in with these little minor course corrections. Now, if you end up on a completely different orbit, or if you're amazingly out of phase with your target by several hundred kilometers, there is a technique to get close enough to it. And basically the idea is, if your orbit is lower than your target, you're going to be moving faster and you'll catch up. If your orbit is further away from the planet as your target, you will fall behind. You'll be moving slower. So if you're completely out of phase and you need to catch up, that's the way you do. You adjust your orbits to be inside or outside of your target, and it might take several orbits, but you'll eventually catch up. And then once you're close enough, you apply your intercept. It can take forever. It is extremely tedious. If you can figure out how to launch to get yourself a decent intercept from launch instead of having to launch and then sort it, it'll save you, it saves me usually an hour, hour and a half of fiddling around. Figuring out how to launch directly up to your target is practice and a little bit of luck and just being extremely crazy with the way you approach the problem. The way I usually do it involves wasting a lot of delta V, although I do tend to get within 10 kilometers from launch straight into orbit of my target. The best I ever did, I think, was 1.8 kilometers away from launch straight up. I was very proud of that and very upset that I had no one to show it to. Now, if you were wanting to dock with a space station or another ship using the docking nodes, normally you'd get close enough, then target the docking port you wanted to connect to, and then that would change your target indicator on your nav ball, and then you would be sort of oriented around that docking port instead of the ship itself. Minor differences, but not too different. Now, actually docking with the other ship, that's a different story, and that's why we use plugins to help with the alignment. Okay, we're going to get ourselves lined up to make it as easy as possible. Swap to the other ship. Bob, you're first. Let go, R, and head on over. Oh, missed it. No depth perception. Grab on, and board. Alright. Jordan, poor Jordan. Feeling like this was much easier and much less scary than it should have been. He doesn't quite know why. And finally, Bill, we'll march you over. And there we go. All Kerbals accounted for. Turtle Lander, no longer crewed. We salute you. You were a good ship, even if you didn't have enough fuel. So, Kerbal saved. We now have to get back. We've got a Kerbin escape in 3 days. We don't want that at all. We are going to deselect. Now we want to face orbital retrograde. Turn on SAS. We're going to go ahead and thrust away from our other ship here. From here, it's just a matter of bringing our apoapsis down so that we're no longer in an escape trajectory. We use the RCS thrusters so that we can burn off all of our monopropellant first. Because it's so heavy and so inefficient, if we get rid of it first, it gives us more delta V to use on the actual thruster when we get around to that. Then once we hit apoapsis, we burn retrograde, bring our periapsis down, we re-enter the atmosphere, and it's a pretty standard maneuver. I was a little afraid though because these two pods are pretty heavy. And the pods fell apart, but that's okay. That is okay. Everyone is still alive. Well, there you have it. A proper rescue mission. Capturing a ship, or rescuing a ship that is on an extremely inclined, extremely fast orbit over Kerbin. Got the 3 Kerbals back safely. I'm going to end it here, so I'm Kutani, and I'll see you next time.